Hi, good evening. So, today my vlog is going to be about the TED Talk that was posted on the discussion regarding Yeonmi Park and her escape from North Korea and her experience. So, I feel like I'm just going to go over a few key points and what I took away from the TED Talk. So, initially, I feel as though when I first read the description, I didn't think too much on the different definitions of freedom that people can experience. I only thought that there was only one definition of freedom, which is obviously like the American viewpoint, where we know freedom of speech, freedom to be who you are, and freedom to live a life of authenticity for the most part. But in her TED Talk, she discussed um, that it was escaping from North Korea was um, basically an essential to survive, and that it was a completely different world from the one that we're used to. Um, Also, something that really stood out in the TED Talk was how she described love, and that how she had no concept of the meaning of love, and the type of love that was expressed to her growing up wasn't ever a romantic kind of love. It was just love for, I guess, her dictator. And I think that when we think about freedom, nobody really thinks about fear. But I found it interesting how she associated having no freedom as like an extreme amount of fear, even to the extent of being afraid to think certain thoughts, as if because that's how um, powerful the leadership was and how much control that they had of her. She was, I feel like it speaks so many volumes, the fact that she was even afraid to think certain things. And I also found it interesting, her comments on critical thinking. And initially, I feel like if someone were to talk about or raise awareness to these people living in this country, they would easily be able to say, like, oh, why don't they do something about it? Or why don't they take action? Or why don't they handle the situation in their own country? But she kind of made it apparent that it doesn't it doesn't mean that they don't want change, they're just ignorant. And it doesn't mean that they're dumb and they can't figure out a way to revolt. It's just that how can you know that you're oppressed if all you've grown up to learn is what you're taught? So she expands further on that of not knowing is basically the definition of isolation. So I feel like they're most vulnerable because they're isolated and they don't even know that they're oppressed because there's no way to know. Because that's the only way of life that they're ever taught. And she goes into talking about compassion and how humans don't inherently know right from wrong. You have to be taught right from wrong. And she contrasts kind of who she was back then to who she is now, with the fact that she used to see dying people all the time, but now her life in America, if she saw someone dying, it would affect her in a different way. She wasn't taught compassion. She wasn't feeling anything when she was living in North Korea. And so I feel like her ending point was something that everyone can take away from. She states that it only took 3 generations for Korea to turn into this horrible dictatorship with all of this oppression and like people starving and wanting to escape, that it can literally happen to anybody. And she kind of brings the whole argument, not whole argument, but the whole speech back in relationship in relation to the rest of the audience, saying that if we don't fight for those oppressed in North Korea right now, being free people in this country, how can we expect anyone to fight for us if our freedom was to get taken away? And so I think her message of just knowing that everything is temporary and that she found a reason to be hopeful and that she's basically living proof that it is possible to escape and get out and make a better life for yourself was really inspiring. And so those are all the comments that I have on a reaction to the video, and I'm really glad that I watched the video because I've never heard a speech or someone talk about this topic from their perspective. So, thank you.